bias can be mistaken for intuition. So if you want to
Good.
make a decision that you've made before, is it bias? Ask yourself, is this bias? If you're going to discount data and make it only agree with the decision that you want to make, that's bias. It's not intuition. And some people are very lazy, and it makes me mad. And when they say, "Oh, it's my intuition," no, they just do it's lazy thinking, and it's an excuse, and that doesn't help anybody. So if you're cherry picking your data, if you're only prepared to make a decision that you've made before, if you're not prepared to be challenged, if you're not prepared to bring other thinking into the room, I really question whether it's your intuition. So I would think it's confirmation bias at work. If someone says, yes, I've made this kind of a very similar decision before. No, I won't look at all your facts and data which challenge my opinion. No, I don't want to bring Tim, Jim into the room because they're going to challenge my thinking. I know I'm right. Then I would say, that is not your intuition talking. That is bias. I would be really, really skeptical at that point.
Welcome to Connecting with Coincidence. I am your host, Bernie Beitman. I love studying meaningful coincidences. They're so interesting and they keep evolving. And right now I'm working on trying to understand the collective human organism, in which each of us is a cell, but it's something much bigger of which we are a part. It's an intuitive sense that I've had for a long time about trying to define the CHO, the collective human organism. And intuition is a place from which a lot of information can arise for you rather than using just your left brain, using your rationality. It's the combination of the two that are so very important for us to be able to learn how to do. And what is intuition? It's such a broad category. There's so much stuff that comes in with intuition, under intuition, and some of it is clairvoyance and precognition as well as telepathy, and some of it is information from your body that's trying to tell you something that you're not paying attention to, and sometimes you don't know where you get it from, but there's a lot of inputs that we call intuition, but it's still inner knowing. It's an inner knowing without rationality. And our guest today is very much interested in being able to talk about intuition, particularly intuition at work. And she works with intuition at work, helping people work on their intuition at work. Tell you a little bit more about her. Jess is Jessica Pryce Jones, who's currently in France, but you'll see she has a fairly British accent, is an executive coach, facilitator, and author. She spent her career in the corporate world, started in finance on the sharp end of investment decisions. The sharp end of investment decisions. That's pretty cool. But after working 10 years, decided to switch focus from then and on. And then on, she was involved in leadership development, working with 10 of the top 20 business schools, including Chicago, Cornell, and London. She spends most of her time now coaching executives and their teams, particularly when they faced naughty problems. She's a great believer in both analysis and intuition, believing that everyone should bring intuition to their analysis and data to their intuition. So, welcome to Connecting with Coincidence, Jess.
Thank you, Bernie. It's a pleasure to be here. It really is.
And it's great to have you, and we're great to be talking about intuition and what you mean by intuition. So just tell us maybe about what you think intuition is, and then tell us an intuition story of yours.
So, for me, intuition is a feeling of knowing. So, lots of people say it's knowing something without knowing how you know it, which sounds to me very meta. But I think it's a feeling of knowing, because when something is going well, you have an internal sense of alignment. And when something's off and you need to go and get more information, or you don't want to move ahead, it's this, you have a sense of internal sense of misalignment. And when you ask people, what is this thing for you, they'll often say, oh, my throat closes up, or my stomach feels expansive or contracted, or I feel an energy towards something. And so we know what this thing is, but we all experience it quite differently. And so for me, one of the keys is, how do you experience your own intuition? And so that you can start to know your inner markers for when it's shouting at you. Because the one thing that we all have done is have an intuition about something and ignore it, and then go, but I always knew. And that is so frustrating and annoying.
And how would you describe intuition besides like what we do is turn it away sometimes?
How would I describe it? Well, when it comes in, it's really interesting, because sometimes it arrives with a wallop and you just know, but other times it's just like this little creeping thing, and then you have to sleep on it, you sleep on it, and then you wake up and you go, okay, yes, that's what it is. So I think incubation is a great way of really being in tune with your intuition and saying, is this something I want to do, or is this something that I don't want to do? And if you're still not sure, it's just to take a small risk, and maybe go against what your internal sense of self is telling you, um, to get to test yourself out. So I think that's perfectly possible. So, for example, I had that when I was going, do I employ someone or not? And I just felt that there was something slightly off. The language was right, the attitude was right, the experience was right. So I just thought, right, we're going to do one tiny thing together, and I'll see. And I'm not going to take a big risk on this. And my intuition was right, not to have got involved. So I think we've all had experiences like that. Uh, and so what told me was just like this. For me, what happens is my throat definitely closes up. And sometimes it's my feet also telling me. So that's something that I've just noticed for myself, one of my own inner tells. But everybody's different. Everybody's different. So the point is to get to know yourself.
Sometimes your feet are talking to you.
Yeah, my feet are saying, "Get out this room."
Oh, I got it. That's good. Thanks for the translation. And your
Yeah.
throat tells you not to speak.
My throat, I feel it getting tighter. And it's so when something is a no for me, definitely my throat gets tighter. And I feel a sense of my energy is contracting around something rather than expanding and wanting to draw me towards it.
For you, in these examples, your body is a source of tells, as you said, like in poker, being able to tell somebody's going to make a move
Yeah.
or not. These are tells. And what are some of the other tells of yours?
Oh, I think that something that is really super important in terms of intuition, which lots of people miss, is what is your intention being drawn to in the environment? Because quite often that's it's giving you something in it. It's part of your symbology. So, for example, I was coaching someone, and my screensaver was up, unusual, on one of my screens. And at that point, it had a picture of a beautiful beach in South Africa with footprints. I'd been for a walk early one morning and with my husband, and someone had been there before us. So I thought, oh, okay, I wonder who that was. Anyway, that was my screensaver, and I was coaching someone. And I said to her, I don't know why, but I just need to tell you this. My attention is being drawn to my screensaver, which has a picture of a beach on it. And she laughed. And because it happened about 3 or 4 times, I go, oh, why do I keep looking at my screen when I'm normally paying a lot of attention to what someone's saying? Anyway, so I told her, and she said, I'm having a difficult moment here, and I've decided that what I need to do resolve my situation is to go for a walk on the beach. So for me, just saying that was a confirmation for her that that's the thing that she needed to do next. So sometimes it's just worth saying, what it is that your attention is being drawn to, because that's part of your intuition.
Now that you talk about feet and stuff and tells, I was out in our local forest where I like to go walking, and it had snowed and then warmed, and then it was pretty icy as well as snowy. So I was I was thinking about this person that I might do some work with, and I started just thinking about her, and a friend of mine has been cautious about whether I should be working with her or not. And as I'm walking, I don't notice that I'm walking across a wooden bridge, which is pretty slippery because it's wet and cold, and I start to fall. And, and, and I wobble, and then I fall down in some snow afterwards. It was kind of entertaining, actually. And and that was a tell for me. That's as dramatic as an intuition thing you can get.
Yeah,
Walking on the beach, then multiplied was like, no, that's not a good idea.
yeah. And sometimes you just follow your intuition. So, for example, a long time ago, I was at a real dividing point in my career, and I was trying to decide, do I go out on my own account or do I take a job? And I had been first the only time in my life I was headhunted, and it was this job sounded perfect, and yes, they were prepared to give me 12 weeks off a year, and I didn't need to come in on a Friday, and um, it was almost too good to be true. But they wouldn't let me meet the CEO who would have been my line manager. I would have been working directly to him. And it was to set up a learning and development practice in a multinational. And I had the contract in front of me and I just didn't sign it. And my intuition was saying, just like, wait, 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 wait. And normally, and they started emailing me saying, look, where's your contract?
How was the intuition coming to you as words like wait, wait, wait?
No, it was just a feeling of don't sign.
A
Um,
feeling. So how do you
a feeling.
translate the feeling into don't sign?
Well,
What?
because it's for me, it's this negative energy, it's this tightness, it's this closing in, it's this not wanting to take the next step into doing something. So it's a demotivation. It's a feeling of I don't want that. Um, and I was like, how did I not want it when it was the perfect, seemingly perfect job? So on paper, it looked like I was crazy to not sign. Anyway, I went to talk about this with a previous boss of mine, saying, "Hey, look, should I do this job?" And have a cup of coffee with him. And he said, we had a discussion. He said, "Why don't you wait and see my next? I think you'd like to see meet the guy I'm next meeting with. He's called Michael Hay." So I waited to meet with Michael Hay, and Michael Hay was running a program at London Business School. And he said, "What do you do?" And I went with the freelance line. I didn't go with, "I'm about to take a job working for a large multinational." And he said, "Oh, I happen to be looking for someone like you. Could you come in and see one of my directors? And could you come in the next couple of days? Because we've got a contract of about 10 days that we want to allocate and give to somebody." So that was the beginning of, I got the contract. I did the piece of work, and that immediately led to some more. And so the long and the short of it was, my intuition was to not sign. It was exactly the right thing to do, was to wait. And I would have not had the rest of my career unrolled around that one coffee meeting, because within 6 years I was working at all these different business schools, had a bunch of clients from all around the world, these multinationals. And if I'd just said to him at that time, I often think about this, if I'd said, "Oh, I'm thinking about taking a job," um, my life would have been very different.
Because he needed a freelancer at that point, at that time.
Yes. he needed a freelancer. So the coincidence was, and that's how it often rolls out, isn't it, Bernie? That he needed one thing and I needed one thing, and there we were, we met. But the intuition that enabled that was to delay, not to sign.
First, there was the delay. I mean, that was
Yeah,
one intuition that somehow you felt constricted.
yeah.
So like that, so it wouldn't act. But the second one was this one or that. What should I tell him? Freelance versus looking at another job, which you really weren't looking at because you turned it down, but you could have said that.
I hadn't turned it down at that point. I was having
Oh,
the conversation. Do I not? Do I? And was
okay.
what the
So
conversation was. Yeah.
it really was even either or thing, and so you went. Uh,
Yes.
uh, uh, and something and what I'm trying to get to, Jess, is like the I'm trying to help our viewers and our listeners to know where the information could be coming from. Everybody's different. Um, some people feel it from their feet, I understood from today. But then there's a metaphor in that, get out of here, start walking. Uh, that each of us has our own different ways of probing, of finding out from our inner someplace what to do next. So that's why I keep asking, how do you where the where does the Morse code come from? Where does the Morse code come from? What is the sound of it? And a lot of people say there are three things. There's like a still small voice, there is your heart telling you something,
Yes.
and there's your gut telling you something. And I think that's maybe a beginning.
Yes, I totally agree with that. And vagus nerve, and we do know that when people are find, for example, suffering from depression, that their intuition is off. So I'm sure that there's something to do with the vagus nerve, and more information travels from your gut to your brain than your brain to your gut. But I was chatting with one senior executive, and she said, "Okay, here's how my intuition works for me." And I think this shows just how idiosyncratic that it is. And she said, "I see a mesh, a network of all the projects and the people and the things that I'm working on and the stuff that I read and what comes up on my phone. And I have this mesh network above my head. And I know that something is right to join together and for me to focus on when my gut tells me." And I had the intuition just to say to her, "Can you show me where your gut is?" She went, "Here. It's around here." So that shows you just how idiosyncratic this thing is for people. So I would say at that point, when a push comes to shove, what is your attention being drawn to in your environment? What are you noticing that's around you? What coincidences might pop up on you turn on your a podcast, a random, what's the conversation? So it's just to start noticing some of that stuff too, because that's information, and it's information is useful. So it's the internal and the external. And when you get a number of these things coming together, um, write it down. I think if you keep a diary and you start noticing, saying, "Hey, what have I noticed in this about myself and my environment?" Then you can start to see, was I right or wrong? And so you can get yourself some feedback.
That's a good idea, taking a diary of what is a hypothetical guidance, and then you see if it really worked out. You've written a book called Intuition at Work.
Indeed.
Oh, yes, there it is. Hold it up for a second, Jess. Hold it up a little longer than that. Intuition at Work. Uh, Living your gut feelings to get ahead.
Using your gut
Oh,
feelings.
using your gut feelings. And that subtitle is a lot of what I'm trying to be able to get to, partly for my own interests, and because I think other people wonder. And you say, when my gut is here, um, the word gut, it has a lot of meanings to it, and I think the heart has a way of speaking to us too. But also, you mentioned the throat. I have patients who their throat gets tight. I said, well, okay, what do you think that means? And for two of them, it means that they better not keep talking about what they're talking about because it's kind of scary for them. So the body is a great informer to our intuitive capacities. So just give us some other ideas about the generalizability of that gut that you've got in your subtitle.
So just to pick up on the body as an instrument, and I think that we in the West, for those of you who are watching this who have Western education, we're kind of data analysis is fetishized almost, and we're not taught to tune into ourselves. And in fact, the very first job I had, someone sneeringly said, "What does the graduate in the room think?" And I started with my answer with, "I feel." And this guy cut in and said, "I'm paying you to think and not to feel." So um, this this feelings thing, though, is what we all act on. And you wouldn't buy a house or make a life decision to be with someone if it didn't feel right. And in fact, all the decisions that we make are feelings based. And so let's share that, because it's how we all learn and benefit from something. And so what I really like to do when I'm with a team or a group is to say, look, what are we feeling about this? And let's share some feelings before we start looking at the data. And then you move intentionally between these two things to leverage both. So you have both coming into play, but with intention. And I think for me, intention is a fundamental door opener for intuition.
Would you explain that more?
Oh, so if you sit down to say, uh, right, I'm intending to use my intuition as part of making this decision or as part of trying to problem solve, we're intentionally going to do that. It makes you think about it, because it's very easy in a corporate setting just to be um, swamped by information. Any meeting that you go to, you'll have papers to read and numbers to look at. And it's very easy to get distracted by that without going into, what are we feeling about this, to make a good decision. And if anyone's listening to this and they're the boss, by the way, get your team to articulate what they're feeling about it before you do. Because if you're the boss and you articulate it, everybody else will follow you.
Good. You've seen that happen before, I can tell.
Yep, indeed. And sometimes it's very hard for them. You have to sit on them and say, no, 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 not now.
That's a that's a that's a
Yeah.
that's an important idea. The other idea that I mean that you started with is into intuition is a door opener, or you have to open it. What I got is you have to open the door to intuition. And I thought that's what you meant.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
that hello, intuition, come into the conversation. I mean, it's like having a board meeting and just using the data. But if you're a bunch of people and there's someone in the group who's more intuitive, and you kind of know that, and that person is confident, you can I say, hey, intuition, what do you got? And
Yes,
that's a team.
totally. And Bernie, I really like to treat my intuition as a friend, and talk to it as a friend, uh, because personifying it for me um, uh, kind of works. Otherwise, you forget that it's part of your kit, and so it just reminds you to talk to this thing, to invest in this thing, to bring this thing to the table.
Yeah, and what do you call your intuition? Got a name for your intuition?
Jim,
Jim.
Jim, come on out. Tell me what you're thinking. I had one friend who used a colleague who said, "I'm handing it over to Charlie." um,
I mean, we can laugh, but uh, That's a good idea. One of my patients is having trouble with alcohol, and we've identified a category in him, a person in him we call Slippin' Jimmy.
Oh, yes.
Slippin' Jimmy. And Slippin' Jimmy slips into his mind without him knowing about it. So there are other voices in us that can be mistaken. Like, oh yeah, go ahead and have a drink. It won't be any problem. And that could sound and feel almost like a regular intuition. So how do you distinguish between like stuff that's more self-destructive and stuff that's more helpful?
Well, I think uh, your intuition won't hurt you. If it really is a genuine intuition, you can leave it and it will come back. It often to me feels like a soft voice. For me, I don't get shouted at by my intuition. Um, if I'm going, oh, it's shouting, something's shouting at me, I generally think it's something else. It's more like anxiety. Um, and so that's why it's important to start recognizing this thing and how it shows up for you. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what I'm asking about, Jess. Is
mm,
the communication form. Sometimes it's a and not
yes,
necessarily in word form. You just kind of it. An urge might be a name for it.
but I think it depends. So for some people, it's more of a feeling-based experience, and for others, it's cognitive. So it might be a thought, um, and certainly I've had that. And for me, when something arrives kind of as a whole thought, I generally think that's more of an insight rather than an intuition. So I suddenly I was driving along and I suddenly realised, oh, those two colleagues are having an affair. Um, and I thought, okay, that's not an intuition, that's an insight. And so we have instinct, which is yet another one. And an instinct for me is something that's it's about self-preservation. So I had an instinct not to walk down that alleyway. So for me, those are the differences between those three things, which are all, really part of our arsenal, but slightly different. So the intuition for me is about often it's creativity. This is the right thing. This is the thing that's just arrived, and I know that it's a good thing. Um, it's a kind of so, for example, J.K. Rowling, when she downloaded her Harry Potter books, they just all appeared to her on a train. She got the download, and for her it was just then writing it all up. Uh, and my daughter, who's a shoe designer, has a process whereby she plays music and she works late at night after 11 at night, so she has a process to get her shoe design creative intuition going. And lots of people in corporate life say, oh, but I am not creative at all. But then you think about what is imagining a future state and then bringing it to life. That's creative. So for me, I think very many people at work have creative intuition.
Yeah, yeah, let's talk about the imagination,
Mhm.
because I tend to be imaginative. I see a lot of not just pictures. I tend to see movies. Imagination is funny. It can make a cloudy day sunny, is one of the songs that I'm not going to try to sing, but the line stuck with me. That there's something about imagination which tends to be visual, maybe with feeling. So, how does imagination fit in with your ideas of intuition?
It's really interesting because when I was researching the book, I found out that 5% of people don't see mental images, and can't do that thing, but yet they can talk about a future state. So, uh, and I was working with one person who then confirmed that. This is a lovely coincidence because I just read that, and then I got a coachee and was working with them, and they said, "No, no, I can't do visualization. I just can't do visualization." Okay, fine, fine. I believe you. which had I not read that, I might not have believed them because it's so much part of my life. I'm always playing out scenarios in my head, uh, and so I think those scenarios are an important part of intuition because if you can play them out and then go, what if that, what if the other? And for me, some of the scenarios that play out in my mind, the ones sharper and clearer to me, are give me more direction. For some people, that doesn't work, and the smokiness of it is equal. Um, so I know for me, the sharper and the clearer ones give me more sense of that's the thing I want to do. But it's not the same for everyone.
We
How
have
about for
made
you?
that we have made that point several times, Jess. It's not the same for everyone, and it can't really be because we're different, but there are going to be subcategories within each person, with subcategories that people have that other people have. One of the lessons of many different ways, but of synchronicity is that if it's happening to you, it's happening to somebody else. We are unique, but we are also very similar to everyone else. So we're trying to use right now your and now my capacities for intuition to be able to help other people learn better about where their intuitive sources of information are.
And so I think that knowledge of something is very useful. So if uh, it's useful and it's not useful. So, for example, if you're a doctor and you walk in and you walk into a patient's bedside, every single doctor and or nurse or medical um, person that I've ever spoken to has always had as confirmed to me. I walked into a room, I knew something wasn't right. There were no indications that anything was wrong, and I was right. That the patient then crashed or whatever. Um, that's one side of it. But there's also the side which I when wrote the book, I interviewed a woman called Victoria Wallace, and she said that when she went into new jobs, it was being new and being outside of the system meant that she could have very good, clear, clean ideas about what was wrong. And when she'd been there too long, those ideas didn't come anymore. And that was a sign for her to move on. And you would think it might be the opposite way around. So, but I thought that that was really interesting, along with the fact that intuition is a marvelous thing, telling you when to leave a job because we often stay in them too long.
This being in transition, outside, coming in,
Mm.
clamping down, time to leave, that worked well for her. What I generalize from that is that when you're in a transition, as you were with your jobs, synchronicities are more likely to happen. And there's a relationship between synchronicity and intuition. And I wonder if you might comment on that as well.
Well, I think intuition helps you turn up to places that you wouldn't otherwise have been. So, for example, going back to my meeting, if I had decided that I was or wasn't going to take one of those jobs, I wouldn't have gone to have coffee with my old boss. And I wanted to hear his opinion. So it helps get you to the place that you need to be, which you might otherwise not have gone to. That's the first thing. But then I think you also intuition comes to play when you've had a meaningful coincidence and are trying to unpack what does it mean. So I think intuition serves synchronicity and serendipity in two ways.
Those are those are definitely two different ways. And I'll start with the first one. I call being in the right place at the right time or getting to the right place at the right time human or just general GPS, because non-humans, animals, cats, dogs, birds, all kinds of creatures, fish, have a way of getting to where they need to be. And they have a GPS kind of thing. However, it works in different species, like the GPS in a car. So you can like intuitively know you should have that coffee with the
Mm.
boss or the ex-boss. Uh, that's one thing to know it, but then to end up in a coffee shop where that person is more what I'm talking about. Is like that get you where you need to be without knowing how you got there because you didn't arrange for having the meeting. Intuition might have told you to go have that meeting.
Yeah.
Where we're ending up where there's this guy, oh, look, and you start talking is the more subconscious. We don't know how that one works. The intuition analysis of synchronicities. Would you tell us about that? What would you advise and suggest?
Well, again, pen and paper, I think are really good because when you are looking at a meaningful coincidence, you can analyze it on so many different layers, can't you, Bernie? And so, there's the immediate thing that's happened, and then, what does that mean? And then, what does it mean in relation to what you're trying to solve for at that moment? Um, that's another level of meaning. And then, what does it mean for the future? About what you should do. So yesterday I was chatting with another coach. In fact, she was coaching me, and she said, "Oh, read your book. I went to a parade in New York in January, and I'd just been reading the bit about coincidence, and coincidentally, there was somebody there who she had been thinking about, was standing 3 people in front of her. Um, and she'd been thinking about her within the 24 hours of going to this parade. This woman then turned around, saw her, and said, "Oh, I've been looking for you. I've been wanting to know how to get in touch with you because I want you to do some work for me." So, isn't that so? You can unpack that on lots of levels. Is it okay? There's the immediate great for um, my friend. She gets a bunch of business, and all she did was put it out there because she was saying, "I want more business," and hey, I need to get in touch with this person. It happened. Um, but is it illuminating these paths that connect us? Which is it an illustration of the fact that we are all connected at some level? Probably. I mean, I would like to believe that. Um, does it to me suggest that in life that there are these patterns also, um, that we are all part of, that we can't actually, that we don't know. So it's kind of this thing going on, isn't it? That you haven't asked for it, and yet that is exactly what you need, that thing. So does it remind us of our humanity in some kind of way? Yes. So for me, there we go. There's 4 different levels that I'm immediately looking at.
Good. And it made me think of the what you are seeking is seeking you.
Yes. Beautiful. I love that thought, Bernie.
Yeah, that's what then it's happened enough times with me that it's kind of fun. We, we we need to include the other person's intentions and intuitions when you have a meeting like that in a crowd like that. That it's not just me. There's kind of a egocentric way of thinking about synchronicities. That a story like yours with the person in the crowd, oh, I was just wanting to contact you, illustrates that Rumi quote, "What seeking you is what you're seeking is also seeking you," and to be able to be open to what would seem like a crazy thing. I mean, because crazy only because our very restricted ways of understanding reality make it outside of that. So it makes it means we're thinking something we shouldn't be allowed to think. But here you have an example of that happening, and it's a wonderful thing, and adds all the things that you're saying. We're much more connected than we are taught that we are.
I do think that we're using 3D equipment, aren't we, to try and unravel a 5D experience.
Well, I understand why you're saying that, and I don't agree with that. or at least I don't, it's not that I don't agree with it. I think part of what synchronicity does is help bring that 5D, that other dimension that we're involved with, into this dimension, or us get to it. That it's, as the phrase goes, the mysticism of the present is the science of the future.
Yeah. Yeah. Through a glass darkly. There we go.
Through a glass darkly, and then we like I get the Windex out there and clean the glass.
But you touched on something before, Bernie, that I'd like to bring back,
Go ahead.
which is um, without really saying what it was, which there is a downside to intuition, and it was when we were talking about your patient who has slipping Jimmy.
Slipping Jimmy.
Yeah, um, that bias can be mistaken for intuition. So if you want to
Good.
make a decision that you've made before, is it bias? Ask yourself, is this bias? If you going to discount data and make it only agree with what the decision that you want to make, that's bias. It's not intuition. And some people are very lazy, and it makes me mad. And when they say, "Oh, it's my intuition," no, it's lazy thinking, um, and it's an excuse, and that doesn't help anybody. So if you're cherry picking your data, if you're only prepared to make a decision that you've made before, if you're not prepared to be challenged, if you're not prepared to bring other thinking into the room, I really question whether it's your intuition.
Uh, ah, say that again, would you? That's important.
So I would think it's confirmation bias at work if someone says, yes, I've made this kind of a very similar decision before. No, I won't look at all your facts and data which challenge my opinion. No, I don't want to bring Tim, Jim into the room because they're going to challenge my thinking. I know I'm right. Then I would say, that is not your intuition talking. That is bias. I would be really, really skeptical at that point.
Hmm. So a bias mass pseudo intuition, I'll call it.
Yeah,
Intuition can be identified by its unwillingness to be challenged.
it's unwillingness to be challenged, and it's aligned with a decision that you've made before. Because if other people are thinking that there's an issue, maybe you should start picking it up. That's why diversity matters so much in teams, so that you don't continue to make decisions that you just made before. And you need different people in the room. And there is a beauty when you have a lot of different people in the room. And this isn't brainstorming, it's the discussion that leads to an intuition that the team have come to. And that, it's an intuition because there isn't the fact and the data that's necessarily there. So often when you're making difficult decisions, you don't know. We don't have the information, so you have to use your intuition to do it. So anything that's going to be this higher, is this person a really great person? Is it right to invest in this? Should we shut down that? Should we focus on this technology? Those decisions, you have to apply your intuition. There's no other way of doing it. You have some data, but you don't have all the data.
When you do that, bring in the other information.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine there is data that you can't label. Somehow it doesn't reach a level of cognitive awareness, but it's still like the doctor's walking into the patient's room. They're picking up stuff that they're not processing rationally, but
Mm-hmm.
are processing. It's like Malcolm Gladwell's book about intuition.
Blink. Yeah.
Blink, where some guesses are made by having had a lot of experience in looking at a painting and judging whether it's a fake or not. And you can look at a painting and take a whole look at it and decide whether it's a fake or not. And it's still based on practice. But there are other intuitions that are not based on practice. Like the Beatles got really good because they practiced a lot. So it looked like it was free flowing, but it was based on a lot of things that they had practiced already, 8 years in Heidelberg or something, playing 10 hours a night. I mean, you can build it up. So can you distinguish between the intuition that's based on experience that you can't really say words about versus intuition that's somehow different?
Yes. So that's all expert intuition. But then you can have non-expert intuitions as well. So for example, and maybe precognitions come here into this bit. So for example, I was doing a lecture at Oxford Business School a few years ago, and their systems were all very protected. And anyway, I took my laptop in and I had my presentation, and I had it on a stick as well, like you do. And it was my entire hour's lecture was around 4 video clips. So it was really important that my laptop worked. And I had this really strong sense that it was all going to go belly up. Um, and so, first thing in the morning, I checked everything. And I had a backup version on my laptop and I had it on a USB. And I took my IT guy with me. I was so convinced it was going to go wrong. I took my IT guy with me and he was saying, Jess, you're exaggerating. Um, I really don't need to be here. And I kicked off the lecture and my first video worked fine. And Ian slipped out the room saying, I'm going, you're on your own. Bye. And we did we talked about the content and I moved on to the next one. And guess what? The next video didn't work. And the whole presentation had corrupted. And it was corrupted on my stick. And I got the IT guy at the business school came in. I gave people something to do, and he just said, "It's not going to work. None of it's going to work." So what was that? I had this strong intuition, and damn it, I was right. And damn it, everything I put into place didn't work. So the whole thing, everything had corrupted. Yeah. So yeah, it was not a great experience, but that was to me a non-expert intuition.
Yeah, that was a non-expert intuition. That's a very good distinction, and that's why I bring up psi events like precognition, that somehow you could know. You somehow you. It's really hard to make up a story that you knew what you were bringing wasn't going to work because you had made it work. So you really couldn't find any kind of data anywhere in there. But so it was like something happened. You still don't know what probably, but it your prediction your of terror was, was like
Right.
uh,
You
was
know,
correct.
I had the cold sweat running down my back, going, "Oh no, I know, I just can't believe this." Um, and then you can't say to 100 people in a room, "Well, if you watch this piece of video, what you would see." I had to abandon ship.
So you just cut the lecture off to stop
Yep.
it.
I said, "Listen, this isn't going to work. We can't watch the other 3 videos. Let's just have a general discussion, and then bye, everybody. I guess you get to go to the bar early."
What would you have thought about telling this group that there was a lesson here, that you did all this preparation in case, and it still failed. And so
Yes,
it would be an opening to how intuition works.
it
Or
would be. Yeah. And I had I mean, this thing is important, was really rammed home to me, Bernie, this last summer, um, when I was working with a group and I got a very strong intuition not to do something and I did it anyway, and it backfired completely. So for me, I'm just how often do you need the same lesson in life?
I need about 4 times myself.
So it was just so embarrassing and humiliating, and yet I knew all along not to do what I did. And when it all backfired, I just thought, okay, right. I have to stop. I really, really, my book is important, and it's really important that people pay attention, because ignoring an intuition is very costly. In time, money, shame, um,
And
and all the rest of it.
has legal ramifications too, I might add.
Yes, and then exactly. Oh, yo, 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 yo. Let me
Yes,
go.
that's another thing. Okay. So ignoring it, sometimes sometimes ignoring it still it has a cost, but it might have a benefit as well.
Yes, I think the benefit is to put you back on the path that you might have slipped off.
Hmm.
So it's helped me change direction again a bit.
Good.
So
Um, well, the how do we get better, as we're talking about that, at using intuitions?
I think bring it into the room. So now I talk about intuition still being in the broom closet. Um, it's we don't talk about this thing, and when you talk about it, you enable other people to use it. And so if you're senior and we absolutely know that you get to be senior because you get to be good at using your intuition. The data is 100% clear about that. But people don't talk and say to young folk, hey, you need to do this. And so if you're senior, start pushing yourself, pushing people who work for you and saying, hey, what's your gut telling you? And don't don't immediately say as a senior person, this is what I would do if I was you. Just push people, use your intuition, um, share it with other people. And I think that our education systems are very dismal in this respect, because they give young people answers. This is right, this is wrong. Intuition isn't like that. Um, there are shades in all of this, and you have to feel what that is and learn to feel what that is. And that's why the cover of my book is so smoky, right? Because you know, it's, intuition is not going to be a black and white thing. So don't expect it to turn up like that. And if you want to get better at it, just start noticing. Start noticing what's out there. Start noticing what's going on for other people. Start noticing what's going on for you internally.
Start noticing what's going on around you, start noticing what's going on in you, and start noticing what other people are doing around you. And you didn't talk about that much here. So what can other people's actions, behavior tell you about your own intuition?
Yeah. What can you intuit about them from what they're
What
doing? Yeah. What can you intuit about them? And where they might be coming from and what might be going on for them. Because the really interesting thing is you can pick up what other people are feeling, and highly sensitive people will do that. Of course they will, and maybe they'll do it too much, because then you can't distinguish what's yours versus what's someone else's. But you go on any corporate program and they'll talk to you endlessly about active listening. How you listen to somebody else, but we are just not skilled at listening to ourselves. And listening to yourself is where it all starts. And if you're scheduled up to here, you have no time to listen to yourself.
uh, I'm just wondering about the active listening, because I thought you were going to criticize that, because I started to when you brought it up. That active listening tends to be listening to the words. There has to be some focus on the other person's emotions, but there also has to be some focus on your own intuitive responses to what they're saying, which
Yeah.
is not usually included from what I have learned about active listening, is integrating your own ideas, not just about what they're saying, but the tone of voice and they've got, but more than that, the intuitive pick you can pick up from their energy field that is vibrating and changing, that you're immersed with, or at least touching on, and that becomes